Lovely day for the end of the world, ain't it? These words were the first words Saul Evern spoke to me when I moved in about 3 years ago. He was a stout man in his early 30s, with a face that looked like he had seen more batters in his life than most. While I found the question odd, I've always felt that kindness towards strangers is an obligation, and so I waved back and I introduced my family. I'm Jennifer Collins. These are my twin boys, Austin and Clay, and the one-legged in the mattress is my husband, Brian. I told him as I got a good look at his house. It was clearly designed to be an underground shelter of sorts, with a tall fence surrounding it on all sides, and several security systems required to even make it down the steps. A fully reinforced steel door that I guessed was his front entrance. Even stranger was the fact that I couldn't see any windows to the outside anywhere, and the idea of him just sitting down there in the dark made me feel a little sad, and a little uncomfortable. I know what you're thinking, Saul said as I stood there. I had hoped he would have noticed. Sorry, I guess you probably get a lot of looks from people in town, I admitted. Oh, it don't bother me none. I've been at this thing for years. They can laugh and jeer, but when the coming occurs, well then, we'll see who laughs last. Brian came over after taking the mattress inside to pull me away from our neighbor. You got a nice family, so I'm gonna tell you a secret. There's something wrong with this place, this town. It's under constant watch by the powers that be. Not the American government, mind you. I'm talking about the real deal. We appreciate the warning, Brian said, and then made up an excuse for us to go inside. We didn't see him again that day, but his peculiar warnings never left my mind. Do you think he's dangerous? I asked my husband when we settled down for the evening. Oh, you mean the neighbor? I'm sure he's harmless. Just to be safe, I would tell the boys not to bother him much, he decided. As it turned out though, I never had to enforce that because we didn't see Mr. Evern again. In fact, for the next 3 years I assumed he had simply gone into his cellar to hide. And then one day about 2 weeks back, he appeared again in our driveway. At first, I hardly recognized him because of his tattered clothes and matty hair. He was unloading the back of his truck and carrying crates of canned goods down towards the blast door, just as I brought the boys home from soccer practice. You think we should help him, Mom? Austin asked. As much as I thought the old man was strange, I knew it wouldn't be right to ignore him, so I told him yes. Bless you, Saul said as Clay grabbed a box from his hands. And then the old man opened the door, and I caught my first glimpse of the hole that he had been living in all this time. There were very few sources of illumination within the first entryway, making the entire structure seem cold and distant. We approached the next lock, and Evern took out a set of keys before warning the boys not to touch anything. Inside, it looked every bit like a typical bomb shelter, and other military-grade weapons hanging on the west wall. Boxes of wires, acid, chemicals, and even poison were shoved on either side, leaving little room for us to make it to what I assumed was his living space. There was a little bit more order here, with a radio, an 8-track player, and an old-school box TV, set up with several different video game systems on an entertainment center in the west corner, and then a variety of different foodstuffs lined the back wall that led into his kitchen. From where I stood, I could see about 3 smaller storage rooms beyond the kitchen, and a hallway running to the west that I assumed led to the rest of the bunker. The old man instructed my boys to set the boxes down, and then he reached into his wallet to pay us. Oh, you don't have to do that, I said, surprised that he was carrying so much cash. Won't be doing me much good soon anyway, he insisted as he shoved the wad into my son's hand and then added, You're good people. I hope you make it." I smiled nervously and I told him that we had to go. When we got home, I asked Clay to count the money and he shouted excitedly, "There's nearly $10,000 here." I counted to myself to be sure, my jaw dropping as I confirmed it. "Mom, do you think maybe he's for real? About something happening, I mean," Austin asked. "He's just a very disturbed person," I told them both. I worried though that maybe the money was counterfeit, and so first thing the next morning, I took it down to our local credit union to get verification. I don't know what made me more frightened, having that much money on me at once, or the look the clerk gave me when I asked them to run it by his manager. 5 minutes later, a balding gentleman approached me and escorted me into his office. Once inside, he closed the door and he remarked, "I want to give you the benefit of the doubt, Mrs. Collins. I need you to tell me exactly where you came upon this money. And please, choose your words carefully. I've already informed the Bureau of this incident." My fidgety demeanor now transformed into full-blown panic. "It was a gift from my neighbor. I had no idea what it was and I know even less about him," I told the bank manager. The balding man sat back and pressed his fingers against his lips before stating, "I believe you. You've been a loyal customer. Now, I'm going to need you to make that same statement to the Bureau when they get here." I nodded as a cold sweat ran down my neck. That hour lasted what seemed like a lifetime, and then 2 men wearing black sunglasses and suits came into the bank and escorted me to a private room. "If you don't mind, we're going to record this interview," the man on the left said as we all sat down. "Sir, I need to call my husband. He's probably worried as to where I'm at," I told the agents. "This will only take a few minutes," the other answered. "Let's start by telling us everything you know about Saul Evern." I opened my mouth to answer, but then something held me back. "Wait, how do you know his name?" I asked. "Ma'am, please answer the question," the second man insisted. Suddenly I felt scared to be in that room. Something felt very wrong about all of this. "My son, he has a health condition and I'm the only one that can give him his injection. Please, I need to make a phone call before we get started and provide my husband with the instructions," I said quickly. It was the best lie that I could come up with. The 2 men shared a silent stare and finally let me leave the room. I slid into the woman's bathroom and I tried to think of what to do. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew I needed to leave. I saw a small window above one of the stalls and I came up with a plan. I used one of my heels to pry the window up and I climbed through. Once outside, I texted my husband and I told him that I was heading home. But the message didn't go through. I tried to call and all I got was a busy signal. Someone was blocking my call. I ran to the front of the bank and I jumped in my car, trying to calm my nerves. I wanted to think that I was overreacting, but then I saw the 2 men leave the bank, and one had a gun, searching for me. That doubt I had was gone the moment he raised the weapon and blasted out my back window. I shifted to reverse, and I pulled out as I aimed for my head. I have no idea how many cuss words I said as I drove off, but it was plenty. I kept trying to reach my husband, but all I got was more static. And when I got home, I quickly found my family was nowhere in sight. I don't know what compelled me to do this next, but I reasoned that the one person who might be able to give me answers would be Saul. I ran down to his blast door and I banged heavily on it to get his attention. I heard the screeching of tires and the men in black running to find me. They were at the top of the stairs when Saul finally opened the door and snatched me inside. One of their bullets hit the reinforced steel as we moved to the inner sanctum of his bunker. Once inside, Saul sealed the door and then gave me a long, accusatory look before sighing. "Thought I could trust you. Looks like I'm falling into old habits." "What the hell just happened to me?" I asked him. He caught his breath and he answered the way I should have expected. "It's starting. The end of the world." "My children, what about my children?" This was the first thing on my mind when Saul closed the seal to his bizarre underground bunker. Admittedly, I added Brian into the equation a few seconds later. I was just too frazzled for words to even comprehend what was happening. What had just happened? All Saul did was shake his head, pace back and forth and mumble about nuclear Armageddon. Finally, I had enough and I grabbed a hold of him, angry that this man was having what I thought was a mental breakdown. "Listen here, I've lived here my entire life. I've been your neighbor for God knows how long. And now after all this time, the shit hits the fan. What is going on here, Saul?" He looked at me with disturbed and sad eyes. "I told you already. The end of the world, girl. And that's what I have been preparing for. That's what all of this is for," he said as he gestured towards the rows of food he had stocked up. "If that's the case, then you have to help me get to my family. They are my world. I couldn't go on if something happened to them," I told him. I still wasn't buying into the apocalypse nonsense. I figured he was likely a fugitive from the law, and was just using the Doomsday bunker as some kind of excuse to stockpile all of this without being questioned. But if I had to lie in order to get Austin and Clay and Brian out of harm's way, then so be it. I knew those men that had tried to kill me wouldn't be the last of their kind. Now that Saul had been found, this place would become a war zone, I realized. Even despite his insistence to stay buried in the bunker, he understood where I was coming from. I could see pain and sadness in his eyes. All right, fine. I can go up and get them. But just me. It's not safe for you anymore. You don't have the specialized training that I do," Evern decided. I knew I shouldn't have argued, but his demeanor was so erratic. I didn't want to risk losing the chance to keep my family safe. And so instead, I watched as this battle-hardened former spy grabbed some of the nearby gear and headed for the top of the stairs. "If things do go south, use the walkie and call Betty. She'll know what to do," Saul told me. I stood there watching as my neighbor that I thought was crazy rushed out into the broad bright rays of day, and I was locked back inside. What transpired next was probably the hardest part. Being alone and waiting in silence for something to happen. It's worse than any hell that you can live through. I wanted to run back up and try to see what was happening myself, but I resisted the urge. I didn't know what the surface could be like or if any of those armed men were nearby. I felt so defeated just waiting, and it occurred to me that Saul was right. I was a coward for not being stronger for Brian and the boys. Instead of going to them for safety, I came here first thing. I fled from the cops. Who does that? For all I knew, Saul really was a crazy old man on the run, and I was trusting my family in his hands. All of these wild scenarios played out in my head as I paced the bunker. And then abruptly, the walkie that Saul had told me about barked to life. "Red 19 to Blue 13. What's your 20? Sounded like things got hot over there." I hesitated, wondering if this was an ally of Saul's or someone else trying to break in. But just in case, I held down the receiver and I responded. "This is, Jennifer Collins. I'm Saul's neighbor." There was a short, audible pause and a sigh. "Well, shit. Is Saul dead?" No, ma'am." It's a lot to take in, but, he said that something is happening now. Are you Betty? I asked. Yep. And if he's talking about what I think, sister, then I need to get him out right away. The colony ain't ready, but we should have transport by the end of the day. You think you can hold out for that long? I had no clue what she meant by any of that, but I confirmed it, even as I heard a strange noise from above. I have to go, I told her, placing the walkie down and, this time, steeling my nerves to see what was going on above ground. I froze as I saw what appeared to be 3 military vehicles parked in front of my house. Brian was speaking to one of the armed men that had come from the jeeps, and trying to be polite, but I could see that he was scared too. The rest of the army patrol was scouring the property, undoubtedly looking for Saul. And then I spotted him, right on the roof, keeping an eagle eye on the team. What was he up to? It didn't take long for me to find out. He pulled some small object from out of his pocket and tossed it straight into the ring of soldiers. One of them saw it, but it was already too late. A moment later, the ground exploded, and I realized that it had been a grenade. I shielded my eyes and then saw that Saul was climbing down to get to my husband. It was chaos quickly amid the others as they aimed and started firing, trying to pinpoint Saul's body amid the smoke of the explosion. Seconds later, Saul and my family emerged from the cloud and ran towards his yard, towards me. I shouted excitedly and I waved them on, opening the bunker door just as I saw one more armed troops approaching. And then Saul was hit in the back of the head. I watched as his skull sprayed blood and Austin, Clay, and Brian got to the bunker. "Are you okay?" was the first thing my husband asked. I opened my mouth to respond, wondering if we could save Saul. And then the entire sky exploded. This wasn't just a simple after effect of the grenade. I'm talking about a mushroom cloud. My family was inside of the bunker in a matter of seconds, and we slammed the door closed. We watched as fire rose from the sky and sirens started to blare. Brian was scrambling to secure the door with more jams and obstacles. It would hopefully be enough to keep us from getting the residual effects of the blast. And then we saw our entire property got swept away as though it were trash. I watched helplessly as we lost all the memories that we had made together. The entire landscape was a wasteland in seconds. And now we were trapped in this bunker, with no clue of what to do next. I went to the walkie-talkie and I tried to contact Betty, but I didn't hear a thing on the receiver. We were alone again. This time, maybe forever. All of us dashed towards the bottom of the stairs, feeling the blast hit the bunker and ride over top of our shelter. And then Austin started to have an asthma attack, and Brian had the sudden realization that we didn't have his inhaler. "Okay, you need to calm down, son. Take a seat and control your breathing," my husband said as we got to the den of the Doomsday shelter. "How can we be calm at a time like this? A freaking bomb just dropped on our house," Clay screamed. "Language," I warned him. Clay rolled his eyes and sighed in defeat. I knew this wasn't the time to try and be a good parent. What mattered was our survival. I reached for the walkie and I tried to contact Betty. "Are you there? My family is trapped in Saul's bunker. A bomb just went off and we're stuck here," I asked softly. I was trying my best not to panic. I had no idea how far-reaching all of this was. The scenario of this being the end of the world played out again and again as I waited for a response. And then finally, the walkie screamed to life and Betty answered. "Yeah, I'm still here. But whatever that was has knocked out the main generator. I'm afraid we may need to reschedule your transport. I'll be in touch." And then the line went dead and I focused on my son. Brian had finally managed to get Austin calm and breathing on his own, but I knew that we weren't out of the woods yet. The way Betty talked sounded like this would take a lot longer than a few hours. I caught my breath and I started to take into account everything else Saul had stocked up. There were canned foods and even a few frozen, boxes of rice and noodles. And to my surprise, a laptop stuck amid the other papers he had scattered everywhere. I pushed aside the mess and I opened it up, hoping that maybe the conspiracy theorist hadn't locked it up too. It was a miracle, but the thing was active and there's a video diary that Saul took every day. Files and files of his time spent down here in this hole. I scrolled until I found the very first one and I clicked on it. Saul looked like a much younger man, not nearly as insane and shriveled up as I knew him. In fact, he was wearing a suit, like he had just stepped out of a courtroom. I'm making this diary in case anything happens to me one day. I know it's not a matter of if it will happen, but when. I've learned a terrible secret about a dangerous society that is controlling the world's affairs. I know some people likely won't believe this secret, but the reality is that the people in charge are not people at all. He paused and caught his breath, showing different samples of what I assumed was blood and saw that it was black and swirling, almost alive inside the vial. This is a new species. They infect our minds and our bodies faster than we even realize. It takes control of us like puppets on strings, he said as he saw the strange, slimy substance come alive. It was trying to attack him, and Saul looked afraid. I'm going to do everything I can to find out a solution, but until then, I have to stay down here. Most of the town is already infected, and I have a feeling the world won't be far behind, he said. The other tapes said more of the same. He was becoming more and more lost from reality as he talked too, ranting about lizard people and black slime. A few days ago, I would have never accepted this story as fact, but now I was wondering what else could be true. I checked the last video, dated 4 days ago. It takes control of the children easier. The ones next door might actually be infected already. I've monitored them and seen the changes. I don't know for sure what to do. They seem like good people, but I know that I will have to take action soon. I'm sorry. That final note was a bit ominous and it had me worried. I turned to my family and wondered, were these the people that I loved? How long are we stuck down here? Clay whined. I shrugged and sat down beside Austin, rubbing his back and making sure that he was alright. As long as it takes. What is happening though? Is it a terrorist attack? Brian wondered. Saul said that it's the end of the world, and given what we just saw, I think he might be right, I told him. Suddenly the bunker shook again and we heard sirens and gunfire up above. My family huddled closer to one another. It was going to be a long stay. Hours turned into days. Down in the underground world, the only thing that helped us keep time was the internal clock that Saul had installed on his back wall. A countdown for a bomb that he had rewired. But the internet was down. The TV that he had set up for checking world news just showed an emergency alert for weeks. And we struggled to not lose our own sanity while taking care of one another. The bunker was small, and the longer we stayed, the more cramped it became. Finally though, Austin turned on the television and we saw something different. A PSA from DC. Seeing other people was a relief all by itself, but what the government was saying about the situation above let me finally breathe easy. Over the past few weeks, we have dealt with a threat unlike any other country has faced. But now things are finally looking better. We are seeing green fields again, new crops, the enemy is defeated, and we can start our lives over. It was a message of hope. And does that mean we can go up finally? Clay asked excitedly. I turned to Brian to see if he thought it was safe, and he was already up at the top of the stairs. We were going to get back to a normal life. I had so much hope, so much comfort in those words. But then I remembered the warning Saul had gave, and I thought twice. A second later, it was too late. Brian opened the door and he and the boys stepped out just as I called out a warning. And then a scaly hand grabbed them and then shoved them to the midday air. I ran to try and stop it, but my husband hurriedly slammed the door to protect me. And I watched as mutated neighbors from the area began to tear my family limb from limb. I screamed out in frustration, trying to open the door and get to them, but the announcement had been a trap. The creatures that now ruled the world were killing my family, and I was just a helpless observer. I collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, crying my eyes out, as I realized the other truth that was far worse. I was alone. Frantically, I tried for Betty again. All these weeks, she had never responded. Would today be any different? Please, I begged. I just need help. The receiver sparked to life. I almost had a faint hope that I could get out of here. But it quickly died when Betty gave a response. Sorry, girlie. I meant to tell y'all folks that it was all clear up here. You can come out now, the voice declared. I turned off the walkie and I slammed it against the wall. And then I just started to cry again,